Did you want to kick off with any announcements or?
Yeah, we gotta do a couple shout outs. So thank y'all for joining. This is the second month for Boro Meetups 2023. Big shout out to Spinman, who is at Vaco. Majority of y'all know who he is. He's a recruiter from Nashville. He also has a team of recruiters underneath him. So if you're looking for a role, he would be definitely the guy to go to and reach out. A lot of the technologies he's mentioned to me that he's been looking for was in healthcare, which is usually Angular, C# type of technologies. But I've seen JavaScript come through his desk as well. So also our other sponsors as well is Fountains. They've allowed us to be in this space for free for this month. And if you are looking for office space, the third floor is a great space for finding they call it focus pods, where you can have your spot where you can keep all of it locked up and you can come back to it. If you have kids at home, it's usually a great space to come to. It's been really productive for me because I have two little ones at home. Studio@thefountains.com is their website. Scott Grabby is the owner. And our final sponsor is, who's my brother-in-law, Clint Mullen. He's a real estate agent. He has sponsored our bi-yearly fee. I believe that's the one he covered, yeah. And so if you're looking for a house, either buy or sell, he can help you here locally, Rutherford County, but he services all of Tennessee. If you don't have his information, which majority of y'all don't, just text me. My number is in the comments and I can refer you. His information should be in the meetup event as well. His contact information. If it's not, I'll make sure it's updated. And I'm gonna turn the floor over to Jon Riley. And I really appreciate you stepping up and giving the talk, man. This is a big shout out to him for taking a chance on this. Is this your first tech talk?
Yeah.
So give him a welcome for. All right, Jon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sean. So I've heard that public speaking is the number one fear of people. But earlier today, I actually had an appointment with my urologist about getting a vasectomy. And so I think I've already faced my biggest fear today. I'm really not looking forward to that. So hopefully that eased things for tonight some. But now that you all know something deeply personal about me, we're going to talk a little bit about how I made a career transition and actually broke into tech and got started. A little bit about my background. My first interest in computers really started back when I was in high school. And I enjoyed doing different things back then. I would hack a video game that I enjoyed playing so that I was the most powerful player in it. Also, this may date me just a little bit, but if anybody built a site on GeoCities, I also had one on there just probably saying how Star Wars is the greatest movie of all time. And also, I was very lucky. I got an internship. It was unpaid, but they put me in a room with a bunch of broken Linux computers. And they just said, see if you can get them to run. And so I was swapping parts in and out of them, seeing if I could get them brought back up. And I really enjoyed that. And they even let me keep one of those computers. And this is my senior photo. So as you can tell, I was a pretty popular dude in high school. I mean, obviously. So I went on to college thinking that I would major in computer information systems. And I took that very first lecture and walked away from it saying, this is incredibly boring. I do not think I can do this. So I wound up switching majors. At the same time, I had been playing around with some 3D design in Photoshop, and I was making some stuff kind of like this. I had a lot of fun with it. And I thought maybe I could make a career at graphic design. So I followed that passion and loved it. I would work the computer lab for a little extra money in college, and during that time I would host tutorials there. I was just, getting involved with it as much as I could. So that's a little bit of my background. So we're gonna fast forward to the year 2019 now. And this is where I start to get into programming. And at this point in my life, I had not one, not two, but 3 kids and another one on the way. Again, that's why I had that appointment earlier today. I think we're at our limit at this point. And my wife came to me let me back up just a little bit more. In order to stay home with the kids, my wife would teach English in the evenings. English as a second language to Chinese students. And so go through our day, put the kids to bed, she'd go to work, and then I'd have free time. And so with this free time, I was doing very productive things like binge watching the Great British Baking Show. But at a certain point, I was like, I don't know, I need to be more productive with this time. I just can't keep watching this. And I remembered back to high school how much I enjoyed working with computers, and I thought, maybe I could learn to program. There's a lot of online resources now. Maybe I could start to teach myself and actually make something. And so that's what I set off to do. And I didn't really know where to start. I thought my phone was cool. Maybe I could make an app for that. So I decided to learn Swift. And I started a course called 100 Days of Swift. And does anybody want to take a guess how many days I made it through that? 4? It's a good guess.
Say 5.
I made it through about 25 days, which I felt decent about that. But as you know, in tech, there are tons of things you can learn about. It's very easy to get distracted with the next shiny thing. But the next shiny thing was actually my wife complaining to me about something. She came to me and she was like, there's this service that I use to help me with the teaching that I do. And they are raising the price for the 3rd time. They're adding new features, but I don't care about the new features. And I was like, well, tell me about, how you use this, what it does. And she explained it to me. And it got me thinking. I've installed WordPress before. I know there's a ton of plugins out there. And I know just a little bit of programming now, just a little bit. But I felt like I knew enough that with enough plugins and a little bit of luck, I could throw together kind of that core feature that she wanted. And I said, I'm gonna make this for you. And so really, with a lot of help from Stack Overflow, in a short amount of time, I threw this thing together and actually decided to launch it and try to sell it as a software as a service product. And the crazy thing is that people actually started to sign up for it. Now, not a ton, just some. But that got me thinking, maybe I can scale this thing, maybe I can make it bigger. But I was a little nervous to do it with this WordPress site that I had on a cheap shared hosting service with all these plugins that really I didn't know what was going on under the hood, and a little bit of JavaScript I did in the front end. So I was like, before I really try to promote this, I need to actually learn programming. I want to, set up my own front end. I want to have this exactly how I want it and know what's happening. So if it breaks, I can fix it. I just wanted more confidence before, I built that user base. I'm going to try to keep my place. So I decided to put promoting the service on hold while I focused on my studies. And I spent months studying, going through tons of tutorials. I don't know, that's what I was doing. And one of the strategies, I've heard of other people trying to learn programming. A lot of them do that. They'll follow different tutorials. But I've heard the phrase getting stuck in tutorial hell, where you're just doing the tutorials, you're following along with them, but you're not really gaining the knowledge to where you can do it without guidance or without the tutorial. And so what I found that worked for me is I would just watch the tutorial all the way through. I would hit it at 1.5x to try to speed through it. I always hoped I could make it up to 2x, but I just couldn't comprehend at that speed. So I tried to fly through it. And then I would see, okay, where's the documentation for it? Is it a framework that has documentation or a language specific thing where I need to reference this? And so then I would go back and try to recreate the tutorial on my own, just referencing the documentation. And I felt like that really made it concrete for me and really stick. So it's just, something to consider if you're picking up a tutorial to learn something. Like, maybe it is good the first few times to go through step by step, but if you can learn to do it on your own, it's going to concrete it a little bit faster for you. All right, so I want to talk about staying motivated though, especially when you're on a self-learning path. It's only you holding yourself accountable to continue forward on it. So what did that look like for me? Like, how did I stay motivated? Was it each day I woke up, got in front of the mirror, looked at myself and said, you're going to be a developer. Get out there and do it. And now it was, maybe I should have done that. Maybe that would work. I don't know. But really, for me, it was much more boring. And it's simple, though. It's being consistent, coming back to it day after day. We're all kind of creatures of habit. And so when you stay consistent with something long enough, then it does become a habit and almost automatic, and it becomes part of your routine. It is also important to keep your eye on what your goals were. You know, I had a very clear goal. I knew I wanted to redo this product, and I had a vision for that, but I knew I needed to learn some skills ahead of time. So I told people about it. I told my friends, I told my mom, obviously my wife knew I was working on it. So letting people know. And lastly on that, you got to set yourself up for success. So during this process, I had 3 and then up to 4 kids. And so I had lots of priorities in my life. I didn't have a lot of free time. I had a full-time job. I could not walk away from the household responsibilities. Like, I still had to help out with the vacuuming and dishes. And so what I did is I would really try to prioritize knocking out everything I needed to during the day before the kids would even go to bed. So that once they went to bed, once my wife went off to teach, like, I had that time to dedicate. Now everybody's schedule might be different. Like, maybe early in the morning is a better option for some people. Really, you got to find what works and then stick to it. But in this image here, this was actually an early morning photo. This is my daughter Annabeth, and she was an early riser. And so sometimes I'd like to let the wife sleep in. And I checked this timestamp on this photo. This was at 4:49 in the morning.
Nice.
So I already had my coffee. I'd certainly already changed a diaper. And I was like, well, everybody else is sleeping and Annabeth isn't going anywhere. So
She does look wide awake.
Oh yeah, she's probably eager to learn. So yeah, I could kind of use her as the rubber ducky to bounce ideas off of as I was getting stuck. But I worked and worked and worked. And eventually I got to the point where I felt like I was ready. So I planned out what I was going to do. I coded it, I put it all together. I moved basically everything off of WordPress, moved the data into a Firebase database. I wrote it in Vue, and then I did all the documentation for the existing users so they knew what to expect with the changes coming up. Had it all mapped out. Launch day came, switched it all over, and it went perfect. No, not quite. I started getting some emails, and not all of them were happy emails. But the good thing is, having a small user base, you only get a few complaints. So the good thing is, with a small number, I was able to reach out to each and every one of those complaints and say, so how are you trying to use it? What are you doing that's different? Because the way the customer was using my software and the way I envisioned it were just a little different, but it made a big impact in their day-to-day. And so I was able to go back and correct some of those things that I overlooked for them. So now I launched it, patched it up for a few of those users. I was like, now it's time to throw some gas onto this thing and see where it can go. But almost ironically, right around the same time, the Chinese government made a decision where they didn't want American teachers to tutor their students anymore. I don't know all the politics behind it, but that was the rule. So my target audience started losing the students, and therefore they didn't need my service. So basically, product's gone. I had two very loyal customers, my wife and my mom. They were the best unpaying subscribers that I had, and they never even sent an angry email. So anyway, that project was done, but I felt very fortunate because in a way, I felt like I made a little bit of money to learn how to code. And so in that respect, I don't regret any of it. All right, so during the time while I was building the product, I also started to think about mentorship because I was just coding on my own. And I knew I could learn, I knew I could advance, but I also thought there would be value in finding others that knew more than I did and that could accelerate my growth and help me learn more. I just wanted other developers to be able to speak to. And about that time, my mom mentioned to me, she said, I think my neighbor is a developer. And so I thought, I've got to meet this guy. And one day I look out there and I see this guy out in his driveway, just great big beard. And I was like, that's him. And I ran across and yeah, there he is. I mean, I think all of you know Sean, and I felt like I hit the jackpot of developers to me because Sean is just such an awesome dude and open and willing to share. But I do want to make a few kind of notes about having a mentor. And I don't even know, Sean, if you knew that I considered you as a mentor or not. I tried to be stealthy about it because I didn't want to like weird him out or I didn't want to be a burden either. So I was pretty casual in asking him for help. Mainly, I was looking to make sure I was looking into the right resources for learning. I just wanted to have him point me in the right direction. And so he did mention some, he pointed me towards React when I had been looking at Vue, and also told me about TypeScript where I was just focused on JavaScript. So he helped kind of point me towards some technologies that would certainly be beneficial in my career later on as well. Oh yeah, and also with a mentorship, it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-way street. While I was trying to secretly get information from Sean, I was also aware of things he was working on. And during this time, he launched a podcast, and I thought, maybe here's a chance I can help Sean. I mean, I knew my programming skills weren't above Sean's. I wasn't going to be able to unblock him or help him code something. But when he launched this podcast, I thought, maybe I could help with the cover art. So I reached out to him and said, Sean, could I take a stab at designing some cover art? So I worked on a bunch of different ideas for him, threw those his direction, collaborated with him a little bit, and was able to give back a little bit. I'm not quite ready to talk about applying for my first job yet. First, I want to talk about my first group project. And a lot of that, I think, became because of the networking that I'd done with Sean, and maybe building some of that trust through doing some of the graphic design work for him. He reached out to me to see if I wanted to do a project. I was like, yeah, absolutely. This is what I've been looking for. I wanted to be able to work with other developers. Now, I was a little intimidated because I'd always worked by myself. This was the first group project. It was also, at this point, I hadn't actually started looking into TypeScript, so it was my first TypeScript project. First real go at React, because I was just coming off of Vue. And also, unfortunately, I wish I had started this earlier, but I had not been using version control, so I was new to Git. It was all new experience for me. But throughout the course of that project, I got to work with some great developers, learn a lot, and that helped me to build the confidence to start applying. So, I did it. I decided to start applying. My wife was shocked when I told her, I'm like, I'm gonna switch careers. She's like, we got 4 kids. Like, you gonna take a chance? I'm like, I think I can do it. So the first job that I applied to, I didn't hear anything back from, nothing. So I applied to another job. This time I got the initial phone interview, and I walked away from that phone call. I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, that was a great call. They're probably gonna send an offer. I don't know, like, you know. So a couple of days go by, I didn't hear anything. So I better reach out to them. You know, I need to be professional. I'm like, what are the next steps? And they're like, we're looking for somebody with a little bit more experience. I was like, okay, I get that. But I said, could I at least take a shot at the technical project that, you know, would have been in line had I moved forward? And they were more than happy to let me do that. They sent me the link, the requirements, the time frame, and I sat down and I worked at it as hard as I could, and sent it back to them and said thank you. And it didn't change their mind. I mean, they didn't. But I kept applying. So on to the third job. This time, I made it on to the technical interview. And got through that, was at the end of the technical interview with the guy. And I didn't know if I was, I mean, at this point, you know, I went from like, first phone call I thought was awesome to now like more reality is set in. I'm like, yeah, this is tough getting in. So I didn't know if I was gonna be offered any sort of a position, but I still wanted to walk away with some knowledge of how I could improve myself. So I asked them, I said, what could I have done better on this technical project? And their response was, you could have added some testing, at least some unit testing. And I was like, yes, that's good info for me. Because to be honest, I had not been doing a lot of testing. It was just not something that I thought to do during kind of like my self-taught path. I wish I had. All in all, I wound up applying for 4 jobs and actually ended up with 2 offers, which I've heard stories from other developers who have applied to far more jobs than that, waiting for that first offer. Now, I don't think there's anything about my skill level that would set me apart from a new developer. But there are 2 things that I think made a difference. And I'm gonna get a quick sip of water though, because my throat's drying up on me, so. All right, so the first thing, and I think this is the most important, is really networking. Both of the jobs that I got offers were from developers that I had networked with. And so even if you're not just trying to get into tech, if you're looking to change positions or try something new, like, I can't recommend it enough. Networking. All of you are here. I mean, I think that's a great, you're already doing it, so well done to y'all. And the second thing was with my portfolio site. I don't know if the screenshot is a fair representation of it, but I tried to focus on more than just the projects. I wanted anybody seeing this to know that I was passionate about things. And some of my passion lies with hiking. Like, I've hiked thousands of miles. And so I incorporated that portion of my life into this portfolio. 1, to let them know that I'm passionate, and 2, maybe to help myself stand out more from other developers that just focus on the technical side. So, all right, I want to talk a little bit about staying curious now. Really, let's see. All right, so curiosity was really kind of the driving force of every step of this process for me. I didn't know where this journey was going to lead me. I started off thinking, hey, maybe I could make an iOS app. And it didn't go anything like that. But curiosity led me to launch that SaaS product with my wife. It led me to want to go talk to Sean to learn from other developers. Ultimately, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, the job that I accepted, they put me in a QA role. So the one thing that I was missing during that technical interview, they're like, you could have used some testing. Well, they threw me into a testing role, which was great, because that did allow me to jump into a lot of the repositories within the organization. I learned about tons of testing techniques and strategies and tools, and so that was a great experience for me. But it was curiosity that led me to accept that position where I didn't have a ton of background in. Also, leading into now, I'm transitioning into being a site reliability engineer with them. And ultimately, it was curiosity that has led me to meet excellent developers who all of them like just continue to inspire me. But finally, I do want to talk about imposter syndrome just a little bit. A lot of this journey, you know, I don't know, maybe sounded pretty rosy, like things were clicking and moving along pretty good. But throughout this, I didn't always feel great. I would struggle with things and hit my head against the keyboard. Not in front of the kids though. But it was tough. And even, you know, now that I've got a job, it creeps up all the time. I mean, in fact, standing here in front of, you know, all these experienced developers in front of me, yeah, sometimes I feel a little out of place. But there's a few things that I use to kind of help me cope with this. And one is just realizing that some days are going to be tough. They're not going to be great. But to also go back to one of my earlier points about staying consistent, just coming back to it day after day, you'll move past those hard points and you'll have one of those breakthrough moments where you feel like a superhero. Everything deploys or goes right or it's done, and or you get all the green checks for the tests. Anyway, staying consistent can help power through imposter syndrome. And also not being afraid to try new things. You know, when I feel like an imposter in an area, like, don't let that limit myself. Like, I'm not afraid to reach out and try something, even if there's a chance of failure. I mean, there was a lot of chance for failure along my path to this point, but sticking with it, not being afraid to try stuff, eventually you can overcome those things. And really, my hope is that one day I can be that bearded man out in the driveway and somebody comes running across the street and I can help them on their journey too. So, anyway, that's all I have. I don't know if anybody would even have questions about this, but I'm open to any questions if y'all have them.
What did you do before?
Graphic design.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if that's
Yeah.
right.
No, it was a lot of print publication as well. So, yeah,
Good time to switch.
yeah, for sure.
It's funny you mentioned imposter syndrome because I was talking to Willis about that earlier. I took a little bit different path. I'm business by trade, and my transition into tech was through Agile.
Okay.
So I went from running projects and manufacturing a business to running Scrum teams.
Okay.
That's how I transitioned into tech. And it took me, the last position I had was working with a company that was working exclusively with startups.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a jack of all trades. So I was a product owner when they needed a product owner. I was a scrum master when they needed a scrum master. I was a strategic analyst, and I advised board of directors and a bunch of other things for this company. And for the longest time, you know, for the first 4 years that I had transitioned from business into tech, I always had this sense that I didn't belong.
Yeah.
It's nagging, and it's real on any career change. It's just not going into tech.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just one day I was giving strategic advice to a founder that had like 2 or 3 successful startups under her belt, and it just clicked for me. It's like, okay, yeah, I belong. This is what I should be doing.
Nice.
And it takes a while to get to that point.
Okay.
You're always going to have something nagging at you when you're transitioning, and you mentioned it in your talk. There's something just clicks one day, and it's just like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
And that's really, I mean, that's a big thing.
Yeah. You gotta stick with it.
Do you have much insight in terms of like the past year or so, recession and stuff like that? probably hard to say, like, what would you do differently if you had to do it now? But do you have any thoughts about?
If I was to do it different now, I would have probably prioritized networking a little earlier, because I spent a ton of time just learning on my own, and I could have probably been more efficient with that. And I mean, I have learned that networking just opens doors of opportunity. So that's the biggest thing for me.
There's a book by a guy named Jon Riley. He's not what I would consider somebody that I would hold up on a pedestal as somebody I would like to hang out with, but the book's called Soft Skills for Software Developers, and I think software developers should read it. Because coming from a business background and working with developers, one of the biggest things that developers lack is interpersonal communication and, you know, the kind of going out there and selling themselves, the networking part of it, because that's a big, huge thing in becoming successful in a new career.
Yeah.
It's the difference between making 50 and 250.
Yeah.
Because software engineers are notoriously very introverted. People want to sit in front of a computer, and that's what they want to do. You know, it draws in introverts.
Yeah.
But to be truly successful and make a name for yourself, you have to learn how to go outside your bubble, and you have to learn how to network and play the game and work with people and go outside your comfort zone.
And give developer talks.
Hey, I can check this one off now.
If anybody's looking or interested to step out of the bubble, reach out to me.
Well, and piggybacking on your point, also another thing in dealing with your users, they are not using the product because they love to sit in front of a computer. I've worked in QA and taken, and once the product goes live, kind of more of a help desk and reporting back what bugs you don't catch when you're QA. And yeah. And kind of, in my experience, letting people vent their frustrations, and then if there is a way to work around for what they're trying to do right then, get them there, and then reporting back to get the bug fixed.
Pesky customers.
So are you going direct from QA to SRE? What can you talk about what it's like to be SRE at?
Yeah, so it's kind of a very interesting transition for me, because I think generally a SRE role would be with someone with much more experience than me. But they were looking to transition. There was me and another fellow, we were both doing the QA automation, and they wanted to kind of extend that career path out some, or, you know, shift the quality a little bit more to the left. So they thought SRE would be a good fit. And so really, I've just made the transition over the past 2 months now. And they've actually had me focusing a lot more on some DevOps work now, just to get more familiar with some of the kind of underlying systems of our product. So I'm not doing true SRE work yet. I'm more in a transition phase. But I mean, from what I've gathered and talked to them about, we're really going to be implementing lots of different monitors to bring more observability and alerts, and make sure that the right teams are finding out when part of the app, the part of the app does break.
That's good.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I work for a very small company, so I'm sort of like a little bit of everything.
Okay.
And DevOps is kind of like, so it's like a pastime that I sometimes want to do, sometimes don't want to do.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of curious how that works in a larger organization.
Yeah, that's about the extent of my context
Gotcha.
up until this point. I mean, a few more months, it'll change some.
Yeah.
So who here is actually trying to break into tech right now?
That's awesome.
Nice. What are you guys doing right now?
I'm trying to break out.
I gave it the wrong talk.
I feel like I've been studying hard on my own for about 4 years, and And I was kind of slow that first year and a half getting started because I didn't know how to search.
Yeah.
And now it's just like an obsession. Like I'm so passionate about it. Like it's all I want to do. But that first year and a half, I feel like I could have done so much more with that time if I had known how to look and where to look. And it's just like a lot of that was just the lines going from being blurry to kind of clicking, like you were talking about. You know, like even now, like I've taken some school and stuff in college, but it wasn't until like I realized that most things are like key value pairs. Then it just kind of like my consciousness shifted, kind of like you were talking about. It's like, oh, like now I see. I don't know how to explain it, but it's kind of like the code in the Matrix. You know, it's like you're looking at all this stuff, it doesn't really make all the sense. Then something happens, and then all of a sudden, like most of it makes sense at a base level for you. And so I feel like I just now got there, and a lot of people that I'm listening to or meeting with have less time that they put into it and know a whole lot more than I do. So I feel like I'm behind running, or like other things too. Like I know way more than somebody might know, but at my level it doesn't make sense. So like I feel like I'm like an odd bunny in the dev crowd.
I mean, everybody I think has a slightly different pace and path. And you know, another thing I would recommend is get together a portfolio site, and once you have 3 or 4 projects on there that you're proud of and you can talk about, like if you see a position, even if you don't match like everything they're looking for, don't be afraid to go ahead and apply for it. You know, like I mentioned, some of those interviews I had, I wasn't, you know, selected, but I tried to at least gain experience from the interview process. So I don't know if I'll ever match all the criteria that somebody's looking for, but you know, sometimes you just have to go for it as well.
That is huge advice, because that's what I tried to drill into my wife all the time. Because she would always second guess. She would be like, I really want to do this job, but I don't have everything they're looking for. I'm like, apply to it anyway. The worst thing is,
Most people don't.
they'll say no.
Is it possible to have it all?
Likely, likely they're just not gonna contact you, so what?
Right.
But you're not gonna get that job you want, because that's what I've always done. I go out and apply for the jobs I want, not the ones I'm specifically qualified for. I can talk to things and how I have a strong learning desire, and I'm always, you know, learning new things and learning new skills and picking up on things. I think, you know, especially being part of a hiring process myself, having done it before, I look more for coachability and look for somebody that has a drive to learn. Not necessarily somebody that has the skills today, but somebody that can get those skills shortly after, and a lot more skills, because that's inherent in their DNA. And that's really what I would look for. So just, I mean, applying to jobs, and she's tripled her salary in like 4 years because she followed my advice and started applying to jobs that she wanted, not focusing on the ones that she was specifically qualified for.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks again, John.
Thank
you for doing this talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
With the remainder of time, we can just hang out and network and get to know each other.
9 years of React, we've been extended out for 9 years.